Hey everyone, this is Clone Trooper 163. Today I'm going to start a new series of videos for the Battlefront series. I'm going to be talking a lot about Battlefront from DICE when we get new stuff from them. And today's not a video about Battlefront by DICE. It's about the Battlefront franchise after Battlefront 2 and what happened to Free Radicals version. And a lot of people know some of this stuff, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of the stuff that I've learned from a very reliable source that worked on the game. I'm gonna talk about some of the points that he talked to me about and what I asked him about the game, and it's pretty amazing stuff that he's been telling me. Um, I hope that you guys will take this and hopefully maybe if Dice sees this video, which probably they won't. But if they do, it'd be awesome. Maybe they'll look at this and say, "Oh, well, those points are pretty cool. Let's add them to the game," which probably they won't. But who knows? So, what I want to talk about in the first point is he was talking to me about. I asked him about the space battles, and he says when they first started making Battlefront 3, he talked about how they were making it kind of like Battlefront 2 style with space to ground. And then he says probably several months after that, they wiped that build clean. They kept the maps, they kept the models, but he says they wiped the code for that game clean and reinitiated new code and talked about what can we do different than going along a path with Battlefront 2 and say, okay, well, let's add Battlefront 2 style. He says they wanted to go away from that because the game was basically going to be Battlefront 2 with just Battlefront 3 on it with space to ground now. He says they didn't want that. So what they did was is the campaign they continued on the path of the campaign instead of and when they would make tweaks to free play and multiplayer they would kind of make those tweaks to the campaign to show off some of those features because they said when people play campaign they play it as a tutorial and more for the free play and multiplayer getting ready for it. So he says they wanted to add some of those features in there, so that's basically what they were doing. But when when you look at this, if you look at this at the early part of the video of this free radical footage here, you see the ETA-2 Jedi Starfighter flying up into space and flying through Venator cruisers and stuff like that. And you look at a Venator cruisers and you see a Munificent cruiser sitting over there, and you're like, if you really dove into this video and looked at it, there's many people have uploaded it to YouTube. You can look at it and you can say, oh, there's a Munificent over here on above the land map. It's not fighting or shooting at the Munificent. I mean, at the acclimators or venators, excuse me. If you look at that and you're thinking, okay, why aren't they shooting at it? Well, each one of these ships that you see in that video were controlled by real players. Now that's pretty cool because if you think about it, and what he's told me is he says that in space there's multiple battles going on all over, not just multiple battles from land and space. He says there could be dozens of ships off in an area of space fighting on their own, and you could be over here with your ship out there in the middle of nowhere on the map and not fighting anybody. And he says your ship could be a spawn point for you. You could put your ship over here and say, well, I want to spawn in my ship and fly a fighter down to the planet and fight that way. I don't want to have my ship blow up. So basically, he says, you could have multiple ships, or you could bring your ship in atmosphere above the land map and have battles like that. He says ships they hadn't really worked out just exactly yet how the ships were going to work with land maps when if they blew up, what were they going to do? Was it just going to rain debris and then disappear? He says they really hadn't worked fully that out yet. That was one of the other design things that they were working on before the game was finished, 100% finished. And but what he was also telling me is you could spawn in your ship. If your ship got destroyed or taken over, you would have to take one of the ships from space, go from the land maps, because he said fighters and stuff like that still spawned on land if you didn't have your ship anymore. So how would you get into space? So he says you would take one of these ships, land in your allies' ships, on the Republic side or Empire side or Rebels or Separatists, and he says you would land this ship, and we actually saw part of that. He'd take the ship, and He took the ET-2 starfighter, flew through all that, flew in the acclimators, and went through the doors. And he was talking about how you would have to initialize yourself with that ship to spawn on the command post on those ships. He said ships, when you selected one of the ships, it had, he said, I think 3 or 4 command posts inside it that you could spawn on. So there was one on the command bridge. Um, there was one in the reactor room, and there's, I think, 2 inside the hangars, since the hangars were so massive. Um, and what was so cool about what he was talking about was you don't have to initialize yourself with one of these ships. He says, you could be a commando style unit, and he says you could go into an enemy ship, land in the enemy ship with one of their ships, and it would probably be designated as one of their ships, and you could land it in there, get out, go to their bridge without anybody seeing you, if you could make it around. Because he says the ships inside were massive inside, that you could have your own battles in these and not even worry about battles outside the ships. Um, you could get there, cap the ship, its command bridge, and capture its command post and take over the ship, and the ship would be yours. And the AI that was previously trying to spawn from your ship before you got destroyed would now spawn in your ship, and you could be taking that command post, and down in the hangars in the other places there could be enemies fighting. And it was pretty awesome to say that you could be on top of the command bridge, and there'd be enemies trying to make their way up, and your AI is now spawning, and you could fight out and take that capital ship, and that munificence cruiser could be yours, and you're on the Republic side. Um, so space battles were supposed to be huge like that. Land battles were just as big. He said maps were 10 times as big as Battlefront 2 maps on the land, and even in space they were 10 times bigger. He says there was hardly any boundaries in the map, and when they were few and far between. You could fly anywhere, basically, within the boundaries. And he says a lot of times in Battlefront 2, you would get outside the boundaries if you flew one of your ships, or Battlefront, if you flew one of the fighters on land. He says the boundaries, you would rarely hit any of the boundaries flying. If you just stuck and went straight, he says you would probably hit one of the boundaries sooner or later. But getting to something different now. He was telling me about the classes. He said there was no customizable soldier classes. He says though, but they had a level up system for your weapons, and he says a customizable weapons. He says at a certain point, you had your rank, and this was only for multiplayer. He said free play actually had everything, so you could click and do what you wanted to. He says that if you were a stormtrooper and you wanted to use a sniper rifle, he says you could click on your guy, and it would have his weapon, and then it would have his secondaries and his grenades and whatever abilities he had. You could click on those, and it would go through, and basically you could pick which weapons that you wanted to. Now, he said early on as you level up, you'll gain weapons. He says when you gain these weapons early when you level up, he said if you turned sergeant or turned major or stuff like that, any of those admiral and stuff like and those type of ranks, he says that you would immediately unlock, say, a shotgun. You could switch weapons in game while you were playing, and that shotgun would be in your inventory. And he says you could switch between the main blaster that you had and the secondary weapon, and then you would have your shotgun. He says that when you died, you would have to go to your character and actually change to that weapon if you wanted it. But he says if people didn't like that, they didn't have to mess with any of that. He says they could go through and still play as the stormtroopers, the rocket troopers, the snipers, the engineers. And he talked about how they had like 6, maybe 7 classes that you could pick from. He said they didn't really have any of the specialty classes that would be unlocked. He says they were more like as you progress through the amount of points, not the amount of kills that you had, it was the amount of points. So if you were playing through one and he says there was art troopers, commanders, and imperial and not imperials, but excuse me, republic commandos. He says each faction had their own counter to these units, so each class, so all these classes were on the same other ones. And he says the Vanguard class was kind of like a melee style class, and each of these four factions had these these units, and you would play as a clone trooper, basic clone trooper. You'd be a stormtrooper counter, rebels would be a counter, rebel trooper would be a counter, separatist battle droid would be a counter, vice versa and all that. He says they didn't have cross faction play except when you played Galactic Conquest. Galactic Conquest had 20 to 30 planets that you could battle through. He says they had cross-platform co-op play was 2 to 4 players. He says you could play on a team, be Empire and Republic, and be on a team together. He says that each of your ships, so it didn't matter. It was not basically it was each all the ships. So basically, you take your ships in combat and you win a battle. Your ship's ranks go up. It was kind of like your own personal rank. You had your entire fleet rank, and they would get better shields, better weapons. Different fighters would spawn in the hangars and stuff like that. And that really was different from the Galactic Conquest that we knew in Battlefront 2. He says you could play 2 or 4 in offline play, basically, free play. He says you could play it like that and have 3 AI versus you. Well, 2 AI versus you and an AI, and or you could just do 1v1s. And he says all of these different people that were in free play in skirmish style. He says you could buy and unlock. He says there was some I guess you could say abilities and stuff like they had in Battlefront 2. You can have a hero, more reinforcements, better back to better weapons. He says they had all brand new ones except for 1 or 2 maybe was from the original game, from Battlefront 2's Galactic Conquest. Um, but he was talking about all this, and I was like, wow, this is really amazing stuff. You know, if we had gotten this game, I don't think we would have had Battlefront from DICE now. We would have had Battlefront 3, and if LucasArts would probably still be here, because they were publishing these games, and I don't think stuff like this would have happened with Battlefront if they would have kept on track, if LucasArts would have kept on track with Free Radical. Um, Not much else to say about Battlefront 3. I mean, I could ask more about this, but as of right now, that's all the info I have on the game. But Battlefront by DICE. I'm glad we got that now. I'm sad that this version didn't come out. I'm very sad. It sucks to wait 8 years for a franchise that for most of your childhood, on the PlayStation 2, played it until you got a PC, and then learn about mods for Battlefront 2 and say, holy hell, there's some pretty amazing mods. So my next video is going to be about Battlefront Dice and what we know already and what we're going to see in the game. Probably going to be a 5, 6, 7 minute video. I'm not going to probably do much of that one. We had 3 failed Star Wars Battlefront games. Battlefront 3, Battlefront Online by Slantic 6, and then LucasArts' own version 2, which was supposed to be Battlefront, I guess Battlefront, I don't know if it's going to be Battlefront 3 or not, but DICE is well into development. We may see a trailer at the end of this year, maybe at Gamescom. I hope. Um, if we do, it's going to be awesome. I think probably back before EA announced that they had the license. I think they had the license for a while. Went ahead and gave it to DICE, and then they decided, hey, let's go ahead and announce all this. And so I think that Battlefront's way in development. How much percent we don't know. Speculate probably 20-30% maybe done at the game, enough probably to show something off. Um, but if not, it'll probably be next year, January to June, whichever. From January to probably June when E3 comes out. 2014, I'm betting 2014 launch date. I don't think they're going to make us wait to 2015 because DICE likes to release their games in the fall, I guess. And when the fall comes, that's when they release their games. And I think that's what we're going to see, a fall release 2014, probably in October, maybe September, November, probably not. But this is. I hope this has been a good video for you guys to listen to. I hope you listen to my rambling on. I like talking, so this is a really good thing for me. So If you like this video, comment, rate, well, thumbs up, and subscribe to me. This has been Clone Trooper 163, and have a good night.